World War II stands for a horrific chapter in the pages of history. The Nazis forced groups who they viewed as racially inferior to endure concentration camps. Many adults and even children were held in these camps. Sometimes, even pregnant women ended up in these horrific concentration camps. They faced unthinkable punishments. Why were they punished so severely, and what tortures did they endure? Did any of them survive? In this video, you will find answers to all these questions. Forced abortions and infanticide. There's one camp, a bit less well known than the others. It's called Ravensbrück, and it was the only concentration camp meant just for women. At first glance, it seemed like a regular prison. You know, they had guards with dogs instead of the typical watchtowers and guns, and it was women who were in charge of the female prisoners. But as time went on and more women were crammed into it, it started looking more like the other camps. The women who ended up at Ravensbrück came from all walks of life. They were communists, Jehovah's Witnesses, prostitutes, fighters from the resistance, and Jewish women from all over Europe. They all went through absolute hell. Not just physical torture, but the emotional pain of having their kids ripped away from them or sent to die in the gas chambers. Many of the women were pregnant when they got there, and they had to undergo forced abortions or sterilizations in the most horrific conditions you can imagine. In the camp's final year, the SS even let some babies be born, knowing full well they'd die because their mothers were so malnourished. This camp was not as well known as other camps like Auschwitz or Dachau, and the experiences of the women held there have often been obscured in historical accounts. Historians theorize that this lack of attention might be due to a combination of factors: the geographical location of the camp in East Germany, the dominance of male historians who might not have been as interested in the unique experiences of women in the Holocaust, and the fact that the full story of the Holocaust started to emerge only in the 1960s and 70s, when it took some time to realize that other aspects of Nazi horrors should not be obscured: assault and forced pregnancies. These women, already carrying the burden of a new life within them, were subjected to brutalities that are hard to comprehend. They were often sexually assaulted by the guards or forced to work in camp brothels. The Nazis who ran these camps saw these women as less than human, as mere objects for their perverse pleasure. And the result? Many of these women became pregnant, not out of love or choice, but as a result of violence and coercion. But instead of being treated with care and compassion, as all expectant mothers should be, these women were targeted for extermination. You see, in the twisted logic of the Nazis, pregnant women and children were seen as a burden, as they couldn't provide forced labor. But the horror doesn't stop there. These pregnancies increased the likelihood of these women being subjected to cruel and inhumane experimentation. The Nazis, in their quest for racial purity and domination, conducted horrific medical experiments on these women, often leading to their death or permanent injury. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't these women just terminate their pregnancies? The sad truth is, many of them did. But doing so was fraught with danger. The conditions in the camps were unsanitary, and medical care was virtually non-existent. Many women who attempted to terminate their pregnancies ended up dying from complications. And what about the babies who were born in these camps? The majority of them never had a chance to live. As soon as they were born, they were often killed or left to die from neglect and malnutrition. Medical experiments. Medical experimentation during the time of the Nazis, particularly those conducted on pregnant women, remains one of the darkest and most horrifying chapters in human history. Among the numerous individuals involved in these despicable acts, one man stands out for his notoriousness: Dr. Josef Mengele, often referred to as the Angel of Death. He is infamous for his heinous and inhumane medical experiments conducted on prisoners, especially pregnant women, at Auschwitz, the notorious concentration camp during the Holocaust. Dr. Mengele, originally a promising young scientist with a PhD in anthropology and a doctorate in medicine, was fascinated by heredity and used his position in Auschwitz to conduct grotesque experiments focusing on twins and pregnant women. His work was motivated not by a desire to improve human health or understand disease, but by a perverse interest in proving the Nazis' pseudo-scientific theories about race and eugenics. These theories posited that the Aryan race was superior and aimed to improve the human race by eliminating what the Nazis considered undesirable traits, often associated with Jews, Roma, and other groups they persecuted. Mengele's experiments on pregnant women at Auschwitz included vivisections, which are surgeries conducted on living organisms without any anesthesia, causing unimaginable pain and suffering. These vivisections were done without any ethical considerations or regard for the welfare of the woman or her unborn child. Instead, they were performed to further his understanding of genetics and heredity, often leading to the death or severe disability of the mother, the fetus, or both. In addition to vivisections, Mengele also conducted sterilizations on pregnant women. These procedures involved the removal or damage of reproductive organs to render these women incapable of bearing children. The sterilizations were often carried out without the consent of the women, and, like the vivisections, were performed under the guise of scientific research. The grim reality is that these experiments had little to no scientific value. The data collected were often inaccurate due to the inhumane conditions and the severe stress the subjects were under. Moreover, the lack of a control group in many of these experiments rendered the results scientifically invalid. The horrifying experiments conducted by Mengele and other Nazi doctors serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and pseudoscience. They also highlight the importance of ethical considerations in scientific research, a topic that remains relevant even today. Hard labor and starvation. The pregnant women, like other prisoners, were subjected to brutal conditions, including forced labor, malnutrition, and lack of medical care. The women held in Ravensbrück faced unique forms of torture and suffering, much of it tied to their gender and reproductive capabilities. In the notorious extermination camp Auschwitz, the experiences of pregnant women were equally harrowing. Most pregnant women who arrived at Auschwitz were immediately sent to the gas chambers. Others discovered to be pregnant while in the camp were given abortions to avoid giving birth. Some women who were found pregnant were summarily executed, while others were sent to live out their pregnancies in squalid conditions in a hospital barracks. The camp also had a so-called maternity ward, which was less a place of care and more a horrific space where expectant mothers were ushered towards death. One of the most remarkable stories from Auschwitz is that of Stanislawa Leszinska, a Polish midwife who, during her 2-year internment, delivered 3,000 babies under unthinkable conditions. Despite being ordered to kill newborns, she refused and did her best to care for the mothers and their babies. However, most of the infants she delivered were killed within a few hours of their birth. Some were taken from their mothers to be given to Nazi couples under the Lebensborn program, which aimed to increase the Aryan population. Others were killed by their own mothers, who would rather see their children die at their hands than be subjected to the cruelty of the Nazis. Non-Jewish women in the camp were sometimes allowed to keep their babies, but these infants often died quickly due to the horrific camp conditions. A few Jewish babies were permitted to live, though the reasons for this are unclear. It's believed that if a child was allowed to survive, it was likely for a specific purpose and for a specific time. Leszinska, who the woman there called Mother, felt so powerless, watching as the babies she delivered were killed or slowly starved to death. They weren't even allowed to breastfeed their own children, but she kept on. She baptized the Christian babies, and she did what she could for the women there, despite everything. The women who were pregnant or gave birth in these camps, including Stanislawa Leszinska, showed immense bravery in the face of these unimaginable circumstances. Their stories are a testament to the extremes of human resilience and the enduring capacity for kindness, even amidst the greatest of horrors.